Okay. Well, thank you everybody for coming. My name is Baldominos, she is Cristina. We are both from Universidad Carlos III in Madrid. And I should remark before any other thing that we are not experts in physical rehabilitation, okay? We are computer scientists. So if you have any question, we'll do our best to try to solve it. That maybe we have to ask our partners in the side, okay? So, well, we are going to present this paper, and basically, I don't know if you've probably heard about, for instance, Microsoft Kinect, right? The platform for gaming. So a few years ago, in the late 2000s, the world of video games completely suffered from, or suffered, go to a paradigm shift, okay? So the way we interacted with video games changed a lot. So we used to play with a gamepad, and then we somehow started to use different platforms for gaming. For instance, the ones introduced by Nintendo, the Wiimote, the Wii Fit, and also the ones introduced by Sony and Microsoft. Okay. So that was in the late 2000s, and then right now in these late years, starting from 2012, for instance, there were many consumer devices or developer devices which were aimed towards virtual reality. Okay, you may have heard about Oculus Rift, for instance, which is virtual reality glasses, which were introduced in 2013, the first edition, and then in 2014, the second one. So what we want to do here is, we have seen that while these devices were born with video games in mind, they were starting to be used by academia and by researchers to be approached to very different fields and very different aspects. So for instance, virtual reality was started to be used for simulation, flight simulation or surgery simulation, and for instance Microsoft Kinect and other platforms like that were started to be used for many different purposes in research. Okay, so what we wanted to do now is study how we could use these different technologies, virtual reality technologies and also motion tracking technologies, in order to be applied to the field of healthcare. And in particular, we want to build a prototype that we'll see later, in order to achieve shoulder rehabilitation, partial shoulder rehabilitation, in particular the rehabilitation of the rotator cuff of the shoulder, okay? So we will use both Oculus Rift and Intel RealSense, which you may not know, but is a device quite similar to Microsoft Kinect, that we'll see later, in order to build that prototype and perform and achieve that partial shoulder rehabilitation, okay? So, as I said before, we are not experts in medicine, but I'll try to do my best in order to explain you some basic concepts so that you can understand this proposal. That place here, over here in the shoulder, is the rotator cuff. Okay? It's placed just over the bone of the humerus. So the rotator cuff is a set of muscles and tendons which allow us to move our shoulder. Okay, and well, so you can see where it's placed approximately. And now go on. There are the physiologists and therapists, experts, define 6 different movements in order to achieve full rehabilitation of the rotator cuff. Okay, so I think Christina can illustrate some of those for us. So the movements that are defined are abduction, which is that one, adduction, which is the opposite one, then flexion, extension, internal rotation, and external rotation. So experts define those 6 movements in order to achieve full rehabilitation. However, for our prototype, right now we will focus on these ones, okay, in abduction and adduction. So go next. And also, there is an important concept here, which is proprioception. And proprioception is the fact that we are able to sense our own bodies, okay? And we can take also advantage using proprioception because in our prototype, as the patient will have his sight occluded because of he's wearing the Oculus Rift glasses. His sight is occluded and he cannot see his own body. So he will have to make an extra effort in order to check that, in order to think that he's performing the motion right, okay, the movement right. And that will somehow try to power his other senses as he has not had it. And we will take that advantage of proprioception in order to enhance the rehabilitation process. Okay? So by now I think this is enough. Well, medical background is not that it's not quite depth, but I think it's enough to understand the proposal. So now we'll talk about the technology. As we said before, we are using 2 devices here. The first one is Oculus Rift, and Oculus Rift was virtual reality glasses, which the first prototype was introduced in 2013, and the second one The development version was introduced in July 2014, so it's barely a year and a half old. And basically, I don't know if you have seen this device before, or you have maybe even tried it, but it has two screens which are placed on each eye. So it achieves three-dimensionality by the effect of stereopsis. Stereopsis basically means that we have two images, which are projected one into each eye, and then the brain is able to construct that 3D image. Okay. Here are some basic features of these virtual reality glasses. It has a full HD resolution, 75 Hz of refresh rate, 100 degrees of field of view, and also it is embodied with some sensors, which are accelerometers, gyroscopes, and magnetometers, which enable us to see how the environment changes when we move our head. So if we are wearing the glasses and we move our heads, the glasses detect that motion, and what we can do is, if we are, for instance, looking to the sky, we can see them in the sky, in the screen. Okay. So basically, it's just for performing that kind of interaction with the environment. The other device was the InterRealSense, and InterRealSense, as I said before, is quite similar to Microsoft Kinect, while it has some small difference. But basically, the sensors it has attached is a full HD camera and also a depth sensor. Okay. The API for InterRealSense involves many different features, but some of the most relevant ones are the fact that it has a hand skeletal tracking and also gesture control, so it is able to detect gestures, and facial tracking. Okay, and the device was released in November 2014, so it's quite young. It isn't even a year old. Okay, so now we'll talk about the proposal and the prototype that we have built for this work. What we have done is that we have built a soccer game. Okay, we have decided to build this soccer game where the patient takes the role of the goalkeeper. In particular, his role in the game is to stop the balls, which are launched. So he has to perform the abduction and adduction movements in order to stop the different balls. Okay. Some of the most interesting features here is where we have the soccer ball launcher, which can be either manual or automated. Okay. In the automated mode, the ball is launched with a certain frequency, which is increased over time. Sorry. But the most interesting is the assisted mode, in which an expert, a physiotherapist for instance, is able to decide both the frequency of the launch and also the height at which it is thrown, at which the ball is thrown. So the patient is able to move his hand in order to stop the ball, and the therapist is able to launch the ball to a certain place. Okay, so he decides how the patient has to perform the abduction and adduction movements. Also, as we said before, due to the effect of proprioception, we'll let the patient only see his own hand, not the rest of the body. Okay, so we can see where his hand is in the platform, but not the rest of the arm or the shoulder. Okay. We have developed this prototype using Unity 3D, as it was convenient because the integration with Oculus is quite trivial, it's quite easy. And we have also developed a score system so that the patient can see how his performance is evolving over time. Okay. Then, well, we can see in the next slide. This is what the patient is actually seeing through the glasses. Okay. So as I said before, Oculus Rift is basically gets that three-dimensionality due to the effect of stereoscopic vision. So we have two different images which are not aligned at all, but are slightly displaced. So the brain is able to build that three-dimensionality, and we achieve that using Unity 3D, the Unity 3D environment. And also I show the physical layout that we have to set up in order to perform that physical rehabilitation. Okay. So in this case, we have that the patient is wearing the glasses, and then this is not well seen here, but this is the InterRealSense device, and it's placed more or less at the height of the shoulder, or a little below, so over here. And the patient must be placed like from 1 meter to 1.5 meters in distance from the InterRealSense device. So it is able to accurately track his motion and to check how he's actually moving his arm, okay, and his shoulder. Now, well, we started to do a preliminary evaluation for this project, And what we have done, of course, the most interesting thing would be to conduct clinical trials, but we could have not done this yet, basically because it involves a lot of protocol, defining a protocol and asking for permissions. So what we did in an early stage of this development is basically we made a survey to four experts, experts in which are physiotherapists, and showed the prototype to them. Okay, and they were able to wear the glasses and test by themselves the prototype, and we asked them some questions regarding how they think the prototype is able to achieve partial rehabilitation of the rotator cuff. So what they say actually is they see that it can increase the shoulder joint mobility. It is also able to increase the muscle tone and the strength. And they also told us, and I think this is interesting for further development, that exercises must be limited in time, because if patients are taking these exercises for too long, that may be counterproductive and actually not help them to achieve rehabilitation. Okay, so it may be counterproductive. So they estimated that 20 minutes is a maximum time, which is actually the most suitable one for this case. And well, finally. Okay, so finally, just to recall what we have said before, we have built a prototype in which we have used two new technologies, which are state-of-the-art technologies, which are Oculus Rift, which are virtual reality glasses, and also Real Sense, which is a motion tracking device. And we have used those devices in order to build a prototype to achieve rehabilitation, partial rehabilitation of the rotator cuff of the shoulder. Okay. So we implemented two different movements, which are abduction and adduction, and in order to achieve this partial rehabilitation. And we have also taken advantage of the effect of proprioception in order to enhance that process of rehabilitation. Okay? We have performed a very preliminary evaluation by asking for experts in physiotherapy, and it shows encouraging results as they see that this prototype can increase the muscle tone and also achieve this partial rehabilitation, although they also give some hints in order to improve the prototype. And of course, this is an early prototype, and we still have to implement the remaining four movements, which were flexion, extension, internal rotation, and external rotation. We want also to achieve rehabilitation in other parts of the body, not only the shoulder, but also in the lower trunk also. And of course, the most interesting one involves conducting clinical trials to actually make a scientific statement if that the prototype or the system is useful for rehabilitation or is not. Okay. And finally, we acknowledge the SEACW project, which was an European-funded project, which is in charge of this research. And basically, it's a project for enhancing healthy life and active and healthy aging. Okay. So that's all for now.
Thank you very much for this presentation.
Yeah, we'll appreciate your questions.
Did you consider adding biofeedback? So if you make the movements, can you attach some sensors to register the muscle tension and things like that? So then you have a better notion about the effect of the...
We did not, but it seems like an interesting idea. The idea behind this right now is that it is always assisted by an expert. Okay, so the expert can of course add any other specific medical sensor, or actually see by himself how the muscles are in tension. Okay, but I mean, even if I have said that we have an automated mode, the idea is that the exercise is always supervised by an expert. But I think it's interesting also to add further technology so that the system by itself is able to detect that. However, we still have to think which technology is that one. Okay, so but it seems like an interesting suggestion.
In that case, then the patient himself can get the feedback, and can use it for exercising at home, for instance.
Yeah, I think.
And then you also can have a check whether the movement is done in the right way.
Yeah, you're right.
So
right now,
there's so many possibilities for sensors, so I could imagine that you combine it.
The patient can't leave the glasses with him.
Oh, well, it depends. Right now, well,
Right now, no, it's because it's supervised always.
I have not said that, but in the consumer version for Retreat is will be released next year. Okay, so I think these devices, which are not pervasive right now, will be in the short future. Okay, so I think by in 1 or 2 years, many people will start having these devices, so they will become pervasive. But the idea right now was that the patient work on these exercises with an expert. Okay, so basically in a medical center. Okay, but I think what you say is also interesting. Is in the sense that right now the score system, I mean the prototype is detecting how the subject, how the patient is moving the arm. So he will not score if he is not moving it properly. But it's true that it's just a motion tracking device, so it is not actually measuring values of strength and muscle tone and that kind of things. Okay, so it will be interesting to complement that feature using body-worn devices also, body-worn sensors. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Before clinical trials, do you have an idea of the risk of making it worse? Because sometimes when you are playing, you get a little bit challenged and you do things that if you were doing physical therapy, you would do some harsh.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Well, actually, there are two issues before performing this kind of clinical trials. Regarding that kind of risk, okay, as I said before, it was intended to be supervised by an expert. So it's like, the idea is just like performing this kind of kinesiotherapy or physiotherapy with an expert, but just using a different setup and different devices, okay? So, is that risk? I think if the user performs it at home by itself, it can be risky. Yeah, it can be risky, of course, because I mean, it can be risky even if he's not using the prototype, if he makes any strange movement. But I think that's something that we have to carefully define for the protocol in order to carry out clinical trials. Okay, so what will happen and what are the possible risks? Of course, if the movement is performed wrongly, it can be worse for the patient. And yeah, that's something that we have to define. So, and also, well, this is a different effect. It has nothing to do with physical rehabilitation. But in some cases, this kind of virtual reality devices can cause dizziness also. Okay, so it depends mostly of the person. So, as it happens with video game consoles and that kind of stuff. But I mean, it's not too risky. But if the user is by himself standing up and making the exercise with the glasses and he feels dizziness, he may also have other kind of problems. Okay, but I think these effects are diminished if they are carried out with the supervision of an expert. And of course, clinical trials will be performed with the supervision of an expert in any case. Okay. I don't know if there are more questions.
Thank you very
Okay,
much.
well, thank you.